Thank you.
He said welcome and good luck.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi everyone. Good morning. Good evening, Josie from FEMI. Really a pleasure to be with you. Now we are a little bit late on our schedule. So I'm just going to inform you that we have interpretation service in several languages, so English, Spanish, Nepali, and we also have sign language. For all the rest of the more technical information, I will copy paste them in the chat. So you will have the information there. And it's really my pleasure to present you our facilitator for this session. Intersectionality, a look at Indigenous women with disabilities, Pratima Gurung. Pratima is an activist for the rights of Indigenous peoples and women with disabilities in Nepal and Asia, and she's a member of the steering committee of the Indigenous Person with Disabilities Global Network. So Pratima, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Jose. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Chazalo in my native language to all our Indigenous elders, sisters, brothers attending this Second World Conference. Today, I'm very honored to facilitate this session focused on women with disabilities. And we owe our blessings from our ancestors, elders, Mother Earth, to make this happen successful and make us stronger to claim our rights at all levels. We would like to thank the Second World Conference organizers and FEMI for providing us this opportunity. And I'm very honored to facilitate this session to reflect on who we are and what we have done to understand the realities of Indigenous women. The Second World Conference of Indigenous Women is a precise opportunity to question our internal positions and practices with a constructive and positive perspectives, moving forward with coherence towards the realities we want. Under the broader theme of looking at ourselves and recognizing ourselves from our own perspectives, we are honored to hold these interactive sessions with a deep and open conversation on intersectionality, a look at Indigenous women with disabilities. I would like to welcome all the distinguished panelists, participants, technical person, sign language interpreters, English and Nepali language interpreters, and Spanish interpreters, including the entire team of FEMI for accepting our invitations and being part of this rich and deep conversation, to share our reflections, thoughts, insights, and to have a constructive dialogue for framing and setting our collective agenda. This session is historical for us as Indigenous women because we are looking at our own power, position, and practices. And it is historical for Indigenous women with disabilities because we are claiming our spaces within the Indigenous women's movement and setting our agenda of diversity, inclusion, and intersectionality. So it is important for all of us. We are looking within our framework and also hoping a collective journey to fight within us and beyond us. It is crucial in this sense that we are paving our path globally and locally. Our sessions is divided into 3 parts, and we have a set of questions that will be asked to our distinguished panelists who are women with disabilities themselves across Asia and Pacific. They will answer the question, sharing their lived experience and being Indigenous women with disabilities in the first session. We have sign language interpreters. We have Nepali and English translation, which has been provided to our Nepali speakers So I would like to request म सबै नेपाली साथीहरूलाई त्यहाँ तलपट्टि तपाईहरूको कम्प्युटरको तलपट्टि सायद तपाईको चिन्ह छ, त्यसमा चाहिँ तपाईले नेपाली टाइप गर्नुभयो भने, क्लिक गर्नुभयो भने तपाईले नेपाली भाषामा सुन्न सक्नुहुन्छ। कृपया त्यो गर्दिनको लागि म हार्दिक अनुरोध गर्दछु। So I have requested by Nepali speakers who can click and go to the Nepali and English interpretation. We also have the Spanish interpretations for other Spanish speaking participants. So without further delay, I would also like to highlight that we have the second session, and the second session will be focused on the Asia Pacific Declaration on Indigenous Women with Disabilities, which was prepared by the consultative meetings. In the third session, we have our guest speaker, Sister Joan Carling, with us. So we will be also highlighting some of the Indigenous women's achievement at the global level, and also the inclusion of Indigenous women with disabilities in her remarks. And finally, we will come with the concrete recommendations provided from this interactive session. So without further delay, this session will highlight several individual and collective institutions and within the Indigenous women's organizations' struggles, experiences, and learnings. And we will also come with the different recommendations from our speakers. We know that Indigenous women have multiple and intersecting identities, which aggravates them in a different layer and position, and they fall into the lowest social hierarchy, and their voices and issues are invisible, unheard, and unseen. Comprising of 28 million Indigenous women with disabilities globally, where 80% of them are from Asia and the Pacific region. Today, we are not in any decision-making spaces. So the question is, where are we? Are we really missing? Are we left out? Are we silent? And these are the questions that comes frequently within all the Indigenous women's realities and in their minds, because we share the same realities and we do not have voices in the state mechanisms. And today we are strategically framing our agenda that intersectionality is the lens through which our voiceless voices will be heard and are hearing at this moment. So without any further delay, we will hear all the experience and stories from our sisters gathered here from Asia. We are Indigenous women and women with disabilities, and we are proud of who we are. I would like to invite Asha Gurung, the first speaker, who is a deaf, blind, Indigenous woman with disabilities, who will share us her lived experience of having multiple identity, being a deaf, being a blind, being a woman, and being an Indigenous woman, and how she feels in her life. I will give the floor to our sister, Asa. The floor is yours. Welcome. Asaji. Our sign language interpreter will be helping us to translate her statement and presentation. Thank you, Dinesh, for coordinating and assisting us. I think the SLI.
Yeah. Okay. Namaste, everyone, and hello. Thank you very much.
So, thank you to everybody, and thank you to Pratima.
I'm Asa Gurung.
I'm Asa Gurung.
An Indigenous deaf blind woman from the western part of Nepal. Today, it is my honor to speak in my second World Conference on Indigenous women, and I'm very excited to share my opinion. I would also like to thank the organizer and NIDWAN team for providing me this kind of opportunity and hearing my voiceless voice. My name is Asa, who's literally mean by hope, and I have great hope towards my community, and that is deafblind community. And I'm deafblind indigenous woman with disability, but I'm more aware about the deaf communities and challenges we experience as deafblind. And being a woman, the indigenous deafblind woman, as I already told you, and I am a deafblind woman with disabilities, but I'm more aware about the deaf communities and challenges we experience as a deaf, and being a woman. I'm not aware about the indigenous people. I'm deaf by birth, and I became low vision later at 30
Perdí la
years.
vista cuando
Now I'm deafblind. And my vision, my sight vision is very weak. I can see only at 90 degrees straight line, which I can see in far distance. So without sign language interpreter, I cannot do anything, and in night time or low light, I cannot see at all. So I need tactile sign language interpreter, and I feel with sense by touching and feelings. As I mentioned earlier, my experience and more as a woman with disability, but when I came to part in workshop conducted by NIDWAN, it was first time I came to know about the indigenous people and women's rights. I was surprised to know the new things, concepts, because as I was only told that I'm just a deaf woman, and when it comes to language, I have my own deaf language, but now I realize I have another Gurung language too. And for me, an individual, I have several challenges in my life. Being a woman, I have to do many things. There are told by the families and the societies. Many things to that being a woman, I am supposed to do, like wash clothes, cook food, be good, honest, and loyal all the time. Married and raised children, but being a deafblind woman, I am again restricted by my society. As a deafblind woman, we feel challenges in community. We can go to hospital on time. Even if we go, then doctor don't understand our language or and health services remain as challenges to us. Within the family members, we have language barrier. Our own family member don't speak with us. We have different behavior within our family as well. Family members and we are compelled to remain quick and in isolation. Agendas do not get priority. Our needs are not realized in both private and public space. At organization, we face challenges. Once I was elected as a president in Deafblind Association of Nepal, but I seen it as incapable, not supported by male members, and I had to give up my position, and now I'm treasurer, and they don't understand us. So we are again unable to put our voices ahead. This, I feel like my identity as a woman, indigenous, deafblind are not educated. I was treated differently. This made me realize how our multiple identities play an important role in defining who we are and how society perceives us. I'm married, my husband is deaf like me, but the society still don't treat us equally, and they question me on can I have children or not. How would our children look like due to their stereotypes and negative attitudes towards women and disabilities? I'm always questioned and treated differently. I got um, I got opportunity to leadership training for 9 months in Denmark, and this made me strong and taught me how to advocacy, and I could work for the organization. Share my experience, challenges, and learning from different countries, and also had communication problem despite which I learned a lot from the training, which helped me to be the strong person. And today, um, so much, so such type of capacity building need to be provided to us, and opportunity need to be given to us. And the indigenous deafblind women with disability, we face many challenges, and we have our own stories of struggles, neglect, discrimination, and many more, which are impossible for someone without disability to understand. So yes, so share our stories and promote them is essential for a common realization. We did not have any space to even share these challenges, and today we are slowly uh, moving towards better inclusion because we are uniting, supporting, and listening and sharing and providing enabling space, which is very important. Our voiceless has to come out and by here, by all our sisters, and we need to plan to move collectively, and we need to realize acknowledge and accept that we can contribute our movement, our fight, and development like our sisters if provide with necessary space and enabling environment. Our multiple identities and unique and distinct narratives should be respected at all levels by everyone. So I would again like to thank you, the organizer and NIDWAN team for providing such this kind of space for people to deafblind disability, and I believe our heartless challenges and rights will be integrated in the final outcome of the Second World Conference on Indigenous Women. And also, I would like to thank again Indigenous, and thank you all our sisters from around the globe. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, as a sister. We are very honored to have you here as a woman, as a deaf and a blind woman, and also Indigenous woman. And you have clearly shared your stories, how difficult is it to have these multiple identities and how these multiple identities intersects at different forms and layers. As Asa has explained, we Indigenous women with disabilities have our own realities and struggles that starts from our home, individually at the family level, and institutionally within the Indigenous women's movement. Because of our disability and other identities, we face historical, structural, and systematic barriers, and disability is not a right-based agenda. It is guided mostly within a charity approach. Indigenous women are still seen as a homogeneous entity, and we are lumped into a collective rights agenda. We share both the individual and collective rights at the same time, and that is why we are distinct. And our movements, organizations are gradually accepting these realities. We share the collective and individual rights, and most often for Indigenous women with disabilities, being educated, aware, independent, getting married, involving in organization and institution, having a good family life is questioned to us many times in our daily realities. We share the bitter experiences of our life, questioning to us all the time, why do we need all this? At the same time, to have all these, we might also need the sign language interpreters for deaf people and also Indigenous women as a local language, as belonging from different communities. We are not aware about all these identities most often. These identities gets overlapped, overshadows to one another. And these struggles begins from our homes within our Indigenous women's organization. And most often, our realities are not accepted, not responsive, and not reformed. Being a woman with disabilities, we are most indirectly discriminated and our realities are demeaned most often from our own communities. We are often told we are less in numbers, we do not have a strong organization, we are not collective, we are not able to raise our voices, we are not able to raise our voices collectively. And this is how the stories and narratives are being framed. We are also told that it is not the time to raise this issue. It is a new emerging issue. We have to struggle like other sisters. And sometimes we are also even told that we are dividing our communities when it comes to intersectionality. So I would say that it is a power, privilege, position among us. There is a line of demarcation of who are in the power or who is in the power, who defines the narratives and the stories of Indigenous women. So it is time to break those demarcation, those barriers and the silos that we have. Because on the other part, if we see the next part of the coin, that we are Indigenous women, we are diverse. Our diversity is our strength, our beauty. And as soon as we accept our strength and beauty, we become more collective and powerful. We have our own stories of leadership, powerful collective stories, and solution to this Mother Earth and knowledge from our grandmothers, elders, mothers, sisters, aunt, who can guide us and shape us. That is why we are proud today to have all of you in this discussion. Today it is time to reflect within us, both from all these realities, the pride, the privilege realities, and also the realities of the discriminations. So the both sides of the coins are there today to reflect collectively in a harmonious way. Now I would like to go to the other sisters who are Indigenous women with disabilities themselves, and we would like to hear from them with a specific question. I would like to invite Sister Jamuna Tamang, who is a born survivor of physical women with disabilities from Nepal, to share her thoughts. I would like to welcome Jamuna, and I would like to question to Jamuna that what has been done to improve the living condition of women with disabilities in Asia. We know that NIDWAN is only a single organization working for the rights of Indigenous women with disabilities in Asia, but we share the collective achievements with all our sisters across Nepal in 7 provinces and also across Asia and other regions globally. So we would like to hear from you. Over to you, Jamuna. The floor is yours.
Thank you, moderator. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm Jamuna Tamang, a born survivor, physical woman with disability from Nepal. And it's an honor for me to share our experience and realities in this World Conference. The living condition of Indigenous women with disability is far worse than their other counterparts due to their multiple intersecting identities. These multiple identities tend to affect different layers of discrimination and violence, which is affect the living condition of Indigenous women with disabilities negatively. So this is the harsh ground reality. Not much effect has been done to uplift or improve the living condition of Indigenous women with disabilities. But we do see that an institution like NIDWAN, which carries out our vision of inclusion and equality, has been established in 2015. We have several challenges within and beyond our organization. However, there has been effort to protect, promote the rights of Indigenous women with disabilities. We have been able to unite, share, listen, and amplifying our voices collectively. We have been documenting evidence, conducting research on the impact of climate change, violence, intersectionality, employment, COVID-19 impact, violence, and many others research. NIDWAN has also been able to conduct various advocacy training programs, capacity building program to empower them. We have also been able to provide small scale seed grant to Indigenous women with disabilities to empower their livelihood and improve their living condition. Along with this, NIDWAN has also reached 4,600 direct Indigenous people with disabilities, with relief and recovery, 5,100 indirect beneficiaries, parties, families, and members, teachers, local community leaders through flyer, 535 plus per peer counseling support in Lalitpur municipality, and 65 plus door-to-door home visit with counseling and food support, COVID awareness, raising pamphlets and others, 180 plus virtual session, and attend 70 plus global UN session and other CSO session and regional session as a speaker to highlight issue of Indigenous women with disabilities we have steering recommendation of CEDA and UNCRPD concluding observation, and we need to work on the ground, and we have need support from all of you. So some effort are start with third NIDWAN and not in other countries in Asia. So we need to do more and learn more for our elders and sisters. We have to establish several NIDWAN across Asia and in the other regions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamana, for highlighting some of the works that Indigenous women with disabilities have done across Asia. We have been able to document some evidences on Indigenous women with disabilities, and we hope that this collaboration and documentation will further be extended in other regions of the world. So I would now like to invite the other next speaker, Sister Pema, who is a young Indigenous woman, to share the good practices of Indigenous women with disabilities in strategic and decision-making spaces. So how has Indigenous women with disabilities amplifying their voices and able to reach to the decision and strategic position? The floor is yours, Pema. Over to you.
Thank you very much, moderator, for such a warm welcome. First of all, I'd like to thank our organizers, our NIDWAN team for giving me this opportunity to highlight on the good practices that we have within the Indigenous women with disability movement. First, the issues of Indigenous women with disabilities is a new and emerging issue. So most of them, and even us as human rights defenders, are unaware about it, which does not mean that there are no issues. There were and there are multiple issues on the ground, full of obstacles and complications for women with disabilities at institutional as well as individual level. We have always remained invisible, and our issues are not in priority in any level, be it national, regional, and global issues. Knowing these realities, I'd like to highlight that we remained active in facing our continuous struggles, and we have been able to function and raise our voices and claim our spaces. But we are only few people in this activism and putting our continuous effort. Today, I'd like to say we need more people collectively to lead this agenda and move locally, nationally, and globally together. So we do have good practices and set examples in raising and amplifying our issues within the Indigenous, disability, and women movement. So cross-movement collaboration that has been crucial to all of us. We are proud that today we are sharing this knowledge not only to Indigenous sisters but to other non-Indigenous communities, conveying the message that we can lead the world if spaces and opportunities are provided to us irrespective of our multiple and intersecting identities. We have been strategic in framing the intersectional lanes and approach within different movement. Intersectionality is core to our heart, and we have been pioneered to set examples working at grassroots level for young Indigenous women with disabilities. So we are advocating intersectional lens at all levels and learning through it. It has remained very strategic to include in education, climate justice, sexual reproductive health and rights, and other thematic issues. As good practice, we have defined our own narratives as Indigenous women with disabilities, and we are shaping common as well as separate agendas for ourselves and generating evidences that shows our struggles, our realities, and our own narratives. I would say we are paving our path with all your support, and we need a joint collective effort on it from all levels, from national, local, regional, and as well as global level. We have been in decision making in our organizations, but not within Indigenous women organization or in any other structures that are not of Indigenous women with disabilities. We have been in strategic, and our president, Ms. Pratima Gurung, is in some position at global levels. But having only a single person is not enough. There is only so much she could do. There is a limit for a single person, for an Indigenous woman with disability, to put forth all the issues that we from different countries that we are here together have been facing in all different levels. So we need more sisters, younger generations to take this lead to take this lead in national and global spaces. We have requested our Indigenous Women Organization to amend the Constitution and include women with disabilities and submitted memorandum and formal requests, but we see no initiatives. So it is time to reflect within us, within the human rights defenders, within us who call ourselves the protector of human rights, to question, are we inclusive? Are we really including each and every aspect of the society into our activism, into our movement? Do we work in right-based approach? And we believe, realize, and experience that our struggles are within us. So we have to collectively stand hand in hand, breaking the barriers. We should be in Indigenous women organizations, in governing and decision-making positions within the Indigenous movement, within the Indigenous organization, as well as Indigenous women organization. Because we, Indigenous women with disabilities, are not just person with disability. We are Indigenous women. We are women, and we are Indigenous women with disability. Because we represent 28 million Indigenous women with disabilities globally, which cannot and should not be left behind. So we need to be more proactive, dedicated, strong, and strategic to fight, and we all need your blessings, each and every single one of you, your solidarity and strength with affirmative thoughts and actions to ensure our rights in each level, to ensure that we are not left behind, to ensure that our basic rights are ensured and we are not behind in any levels, and to prove how capable we are. Thank you. With these best practices, I'd like to end my thoughts here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pema, for highlighting the best practices that Indigenous women with disabilities have so far achieved. And I think these best practices are the way and path to all our sisters to move ahead collectively. Now I would like to invite Sister Chongsin Koren from India, a visually impaired woman with disabilities to share her experiences. What are the challenges for greater inclusion of Indigenous women with disabilities within the Indigenous women's movement? The floor is your sister. So I would like to fix your camera and also the position and deliver your thoughts and ideas. Chongsin. Over to you. The floor is your Chongsin.
Voice, okay. Good morning and good afternoon to each and everyone who are present here today on this very session. First of all, I would like to thank to the organizers, to the FIMI and the NIDWAN team for making this event. And also I would like to thank our today's moderator, that is Sister Pratima Gurung, for such a wonderful time and giving me such a platform. And also I thank to all the participants. And I am Tongsin Koreng, an Indigenous minority woman with visual impairment from Manipur, Northeast India. Today, I will be speaking on the challenges faced by the Indigenous women and the Indigenous movement. The challenges faced by Indigenous women with disabilities can be categorized in two types: at private and public sphere. At private sphere, we face challenges within our family members based on gender, disabilities, and Indigenous identities. We face lack of recognition and participation within our family members. There are challenges to get basic daily services like access to education, health, and livelihood schemes. And our voices are often not heard and accepted within the family sphere. We remain as a useless being to the society who cannot contribute to ourselves and to the family that we live. And these challenges are further compounded as we cannot come independently as other Indigenous sisters. This is our first challenge, and even if we are out of our houses, we are questioned why we need to be united. Why would we need services and we do not find enabling environment to engage in organization and be united? We are often questioned why we need an institution when we are getting food to eat and the clothes to wear. There is lack of acceptance within the families, societies, institutions, and in community that we are living. We are not included in decision made for us, and there is no recognition. There are two types of recognition, that is our individual recognition and institutional recognition. We face challenges in our demands for both. Within the Indigenous women movement, we face the challenges of lack of representation and participation in decision-making space. We are not provided membership in any of the Indigenous women organization, which is our reality and a question towards the society and to the whole world. Where are we today? Within an Indigenous movement, in Indigenous women constituency, we are invisible at local, national, regional, and the global level. We have not been able to accept the fact that we Indigenous women with disabilities have the same human rights like others, like our other Indigenous sisters. Though we are accepted by our brothers and sisters, women with disabilities are looked for charity-based perspectives. They are approached because of their disabilities and provided sympathy and care, rather than considering them human beings who has their rights to live a dignified life. Within the Indigenous women movement, the issues of women with disabilities have to be realized practically and understood clearly by our sisters about our multiple needs and priorities that are different and unique. Being a visually impaired person, I need assistance to be a part of discussion, which is my fundamental right. But in the excuses of lack of personal assistance, I'm often left behind. On disability inclusion needs have not been able to set in Indigenous women movement. The Indigenous women movement is also preoccupied with sexism, patriarchy, albism, age, and other, which perceives the behaviors on towards us. For disability in such movement, there are no social responsibilities as an institution towards women with disabilities within the Indigenous movement. Similarly, the ground realities, collective struggle, collective achievement of women with disabilities have not been able to count forward, shared, and internalized, and there is lack of discussion and realization of fundamental needs of women with disabilities within the Indigenous women movement. So this realization and internalization within us is a first step, and moving this internalization to general public is our goal. And lastly, being a woman with disability, facing the challenges of discrimination has become our biggest struggle. Thank you so much for the time, and thank you each and everyone. Once again, here I conclude my speech. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Chong Sin, for sharing your struggles and what the Indigenous movement and Indigenous women movement collectively have to do further in coming days. Now I would like to invite Sister Linh Dang from representing from Vietnam, a physical Indigenous woman with disabilities, to share her experiences that what need to be done further to mainstream the disability inclusion within the Indigenous women's movement. So the floor is yours, Sister.
Good morning from Vietnam, everyone. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we are able to hear you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. To begin with, I would like to say thanks to the organizers for providing me this place to represent the Indigenous women with disability from Vietnam and put our issue in this platform. And allow me to introduce myself. I am Linh Đặng Thùy Linh, and I am a woman with disability in my 20s, and I have a long black hair and wearing a blue t-shirt today. So there's a few things I would like to to present which are essential for mainstreaming the disability inclusion within the Indigenous women's movement. I would like to highlight the three following points. First is the realization and acceptance. The next one is inclusion of people with disability. And the last one is meaningful participation in decision-making space. So uh, the first one is regarding the realization and acceptance. First of all, it should be accepted and recognized by all that disability is human rights and cross-cutting issue, and it is accountable in any community and situation. The agenda and the issues of women with disability should be integrated in every decision-making space nationally and globally. The organizations of women with disability have not been able to unite and organize, so that's all the organizations should come together to know more, about our common structure and situation. And also the Indigenous women's movement needs to boost sincere efforts to unite the women with disability and develop their capacity building, create awareness about our rights among the women with disability to strengthen the networks and the movement. And furthermore, the organizations of women with disabilities should conduct the specific targets mandatory programs which have to mainstream the situation of Indigenous women with disability. The next one, in terms of the inclusion of people with disability, it is fundamental rights of people with disability to consider is a fundamental human rights. For example, like women with disability who have used wheelchair should have rights to have personal assistance based on their needs, and also the deaf persons should have right to have sign language interpreter service. These needs are not necessary or additional services, but based on human rights, and this needs to be realized and acknowledged. And also, we should sensitive about the rights of people with disability and prioritize the issue of Indigenous women with disability. And the last one is about the meaningful participation in decision-making spaces. There should be meaningful participation and representation of women with disability in decision-making structure and spaces. And only then the issues of women disabilities can be heard. And to strengthen the organizations of women with disability, the Indigenous organizations from national, regional, and global levels should have collective effort, a special and major effort to prioritize the issue and also the agenda of Indigenous women with disability. And then we can mainstream the disability inclusion within the Indigenous women movement. And finally, I would like to highlight one key issue that our sister and elder has to know that our structure to reach and to assess the building and infrastructure and how we face challenges in assessing education, how we are humiliated as soon as we speak out our story. But we all need to know that here our heart-wrenching story and narrative from ground and our experience that's your experience and the experience which are far from your. So if these points are realized, then only we will be considered as humans as others. So that is my presentation. Thank you for having me today, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Sister Linh Dang from Vietnam for sharing your recommendations and what Indigenous women movement have collectively to do for the inclusion of women with disabilities. So moving from Vietnam, now I would like to move to Myanmar. We have already heard from the 4 speakers with 4 different questions. Now I would like to request our sister from Myanmar to highlight some of the important recommendations and issues from your country. The floor is your sister Ching Pao Loon from Myanmar.
Today, I am very thankful to NIDWAN for providing me this opportunity to speak in this interactive event. My name is Jington Loon and I am an Indigenous woman with disability with physical impairment from Myanmar. First, the challenges Indigenous women with disabilities face are deep, instant and different. We are in turmoil condition in our country. There are excessive human rights violations in our country and during emergency like disaster and armed conflict we face enormous challenges. We are unsafe, at risk and are vulnerable because we are women, Indigenous women and women with disabilities. Violence, abuse, harassment happen to us daily and these stories are not documented nor heard. We have language barriers. They are only organizations of people with disabilities and no organization that represent Indigenous women with disabilities and they do not include or advocate for Indigenous issues and perspectives. So we are in margins and our voices are unheard because we are not collected in this manner. So it is important to unite and build ourselves strongly with networks like AIPP, NIDWAN, FIMI, and others should help us to promote our rights. Second, we need to work together with all organizations and governments so we need to know our rights at community level. We need to provide platforms to reach to our communities and talk with them, which requires utmost cooperation and support. We are far from technology, access to technology, and technology is still a great barrier. Awareness is to share so we know all about these issues. We need to make mechanisms that specifically addresses gross human rights violations to Indigenous peoples and women with disabilities and make case to face is collectively. This is what I want to add as an Indigenous woman with disabilities from Myanmar. Thank you.
Yes, sister, for highlighting some of the very crucial issues about the human rights violation on Indigenous people. And when human rights violations are happening, the Indigenous people with disabilities and women with disabilities face unsafe situation and critical situation. And that is why we need to work collectively. So thank you for your remarks. I would now like to request the other speaker from the floor. Anyone can entertain. I guess it is Mira Tamang who want to have your thoughts and opinion on the issues that we have left so far. Thank you. Over to you, Mira.
Fiafula to everyone. My name is Mira Tamang. Today, I'm very thankful for the organizers and NIDWAN for providing me this opportunity to speak in this interactive event. I'm Indigenous woman with disability with physical impairment from Nepal, and I would like to add few things which has not been brought till now. First, we Indigenous women with disabilities face challenges and struggle to bring our own voices at all levels because we don't have education, we are not active in the public space like government, local office, media, lack awareness, and don't know about our own rights, institution, and state-led process. So we are left always behind, and we have challenged to even manage our daily food and basic needs. We do not get jobs because of our multiple identities. Disability becomes first, and then being woman becomes our major barriers. So we need to have mechanism to educate, support Indigenous women with disabilities in education, training, skills, fellowship, and work in organizations like NIDWAN. But due to limited fund, we remain limited and our participation becomes restricted, so we cannot go anywhere and do anything. So space should be generated to us so that we can live dignified life. Our disability and gender challenges remain with us all the time, and we don't have indigenous knowledge which need to be sensitized at all levels and make the leaders aware. We want to learn from all of you and move together, and we're still learning. So this will be continued in coming days as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mira. I just wanted to know, because I have been receiving information from our sisters that they are not able to hear English Nepali translation. So I just wanted to know from the Nepali participants whether you are hearing or you are able to hear the translation or not. Pema सुनिएको छ?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. त्यो नेपाली के अरे म्युट गर्दाखेरि भएको छैन भनेर भनेको छ कि?
हजुर, हाम्रो अघिसम्म त हाम्रो प्रणिकाजीको सुनिरहेको थियो।
त्यो चेक गर्नु होला है, मलाई यहाँ मेसेज लेखिराख्नु पर्छ। Thank you for this technical glitch. We just wanted to make sure that our participants from Nepal are able to hear and listen the Nepali and English translation. So we wanted to make sure about this. We are very thankful to all our sisters who have already contributed their opinions and experiences. We are in the second session. I would like to thank all the speakers. When I move to the next session, it is more about the reflection on the Asia Pacific Declaration. We had prepared a national declaration by having a consultation from 7 provinces of Nepal on 9th August, and we endorsed it through the national gathering. And now again, we had a consultation within Asia Pacific region from 9 countries on 18th of August. And we would like to request our sister Nuva that we have prepared the Asia Pacific declarations, and we would like to request Nuva to read out this declaration, though the declaration is very long, but I would like to request Nuva to make it as shorter as possible. And we would collectively like to endorse this declaration from this gathering. We would also like to have your suggestion, opinion, and thoughts on this declaration, because this declaration will be submitted to the World Conference organizer. We will also have a global declaration on Indigenous women with disabilities that will contribute to the outcome document of the World Conference on Indigenous Women. So this is how we are collectively moving forward. So now I would like to request Nuva to read out the Asia Pacific Declaration. Over to you, Nuva.
Thank you, Ms. Pratima, for passing on the floor to me. Sewa to everyone. I am Nuvarai from Nepal. I would like to thank the organizers and NIDWAN for providing this platform for us to raise our voice collectively. So moving on, Asia Pacific Declaration on Indigenous Women with Disabilities. We Indigenous women with disabilities from 9 countries of Asia and Pacific gathered on the occasion of the Second World Conference on Indigenous Women, organized by FEMI and Regional Indigenous Women Network. Leaders, activists, advocates, and human rights defenders representing 9 countries of Asia and Pacific on 19th August 2021 joined together to consolidate and share our stories of struggles, victories, challenges, and demands. We, Indigenous women with disabilities with multiple and intersecting identities, face distinct challenges in our daily lives. We also acknowledge the contribution of our ancestors and elders who paved progressive and inclusive path towards our collective aspirations for future generations. We assert our collective and individual rights, right to self-determination, which influence the direct, full, and effective participation of Indigenous women with disabilities in all matters relating to our human rights, socio-political status, and well-being. We endorse the principles of respecting the diversity.
त्यही त मलाई उतापट्टि चाहिँ अर्गनाइजरले
प्रतिमा दिदी तपाईको माइक अन छ
इन्टरप्रिटेसन भएको छैन कहाँ गयो भनेर अघि नैदेखि भनेको भनेछ कि
We endorse the principles of respecting the diversity within women, Indigenous women, and peoples with disabilities by seeking strategies to reach the furthest part and by acknowledging nothing about us without us, and further declare everything about us with us. We recall all the international human rights laws and instruments related to Indigenous women and persons with disabilities. All these are mentioned in the documents, but considering the time limit, I would like to skip it for now. We welcome the concluding observations of CRPD, CEDAW, UNPFII, and the study conducted on 2012 entitled Study on the Situation of Indigenous Persons with Disabilities, as well as the recommendation of the Permanent Forum and the MRIP report from 2012. The IASG report on Indigenous Peoples Issues, thematic paper on the rights of Indigenous peoples, persons with disabilities 2014, and the report of the Open Working Group on Sustainable Development Goals 2014. We take into account that 1 billion, that is 15% of the world's population, has a form of disability. 470 million indigenous peoples, where the number of indigenous peoples with disabilities globally is 54 million, and 28 million indigenous women with disabilities, with Global South accounting 80% of them, of which many live in Asia and Pacific region. We stress, due to our multiple and intersecting identities, we are invisible, and our issues are most often left out. Indigenous women with disabilities face compounded forms of barrier to participate in the society due to their indigeneity, gender, disability, and intersecting identities, including geography, education, employment, profession, age, and so on. We have limited data, statistics, research, and information available on Indigenous women with disabilities. We are deprived of vital registration such as birth registration, citizenship certificate, disability identity card, as well as the lack of disaggregated data by age, sex, ethnicity, and disability. Language barrier, lack of knowledge on accessible language like sign language, braille, mother tongue, and local language and pictorials, and the lack of inaccessible infrastructures and technology at public and private sphere along with SLI remains one of the key challenges regarding the lack of participation and representation of Indigenous women with disabilities in the decision-making spaces and making their voice heard on the issues that impact their lives. Some of the Indigenous women with disabilities, such as Indigenous girls, children, elderly, women with psychosocial disabilities, intellectual disabilities, deaf, severe and profound disability face greater marginalization to participate meaningfully and are unsafe. Indigenous women with disabilities are not able to access state-related disability services like health, rehabilitation, social protection measures, education, employment. Prevalence of disability rates are higher among indigenous communities, and those residing in the hilly and rural areas face further challenges in exercising and enjoying their rights. We face further barriers in accessing institutional processes like administration and legal, following state rules and demanding for our rights as we are not familiar with state progresses. Our rights as Indigenous women with disabilities are not in the agenda of Indigenous women, disability, and other movements. We are invisible in the spheres, private, public, and in Indigenous women movement and structures. We confront obstacles in getting united, organized, and be part of discussion within our own communities and Indigenous women organizations. We are not members of any Indigenous women organizations and Indigenous peoples organizations. We receive no information at all levels during natural disaster, political crisis, emergency, COVID, or armed conflict, which violates our fundamental right to live, information, and remain safe. During all types of emergencies, we are excluded from disaster risk reduction and humanitarian planning responses like rescue, relief, rehabilitate, recovery, and resilience building. In Indonesia and Nepal, during COVID-19, vaccination was provided on the basis of registered citizenship, due to which indigenous women with disabilities were neglected and were not considered as citizens, and indigenous peoples with disabilities are often stigmatized. Free, prior, and informed consent is crucial at all levels, but these concerns related with indigenous women with disabilities are often neglected. Indigenous women with disabilities are unsafe within private and public sphere as we are 4 times more vulnerable, and 85% of us are at risk of regular, historical, systematic, structural violence, rape, abuse, including direct and indirect discrimination in our lifetime. We lack secure platform to voice out our challenges and struggles as Indigenous women with disabilities, as we are often suppressed and dominated within our own movement and organizations. We are deeply concerned that Indigenous women with disabilities are overrepresented among those living in absolute poverty and continue to exist as one of the world's most at-risk populations. We are we are more at risk from the effects of maternal and child mortality, infectious diseases including sexual and reproductive health, pandemic, illegal mining, developmental aggression, and so on. We face environmental, institutional, programmatic, psychosocial, and multiple identities barriers as an impact of climate change. We are deeply disappointed as the government policies, programs, and strategies are limitedly aligned with the agreed international instruments and its concluding observations of CEDAW, UNCRPD, UPR, UNDRIP, and SDGs. So far, there is no or limited impact on indigenous women with disabilities with these instruments due to the lack of inclusion, accessibility needs, and the targeted policies and programs design, implementation, and monitoring in global level. We call upon all stakeholders and development partners, including international organizations and communities, indigenous peoples organizations, to ensure human rights of indigenous women with disabilities to live dignified life, mainstream gender, disability, and indigenous lens, ensure sufficient resource mobilization, and targeted programs to ensure effective, meaningful, and substantive participation of indigenous women with disabilities. We urge the organizers of Second World Conference on Indigenous Women, development partners, indigenous peoples and indigenous women organizations, organizations of peoples with disabilities, civil society organizations, and other private and public stakeholders to take all appropriate measures to address on the issues. Issue number 1, include all the proposals in the outcome document declaration of the Second World Conference on Indigenous Women by acknowledging Indigenous women with disabilities and their representation at all levels and establish an effective policy mechanism to hold states accountable to ensure human rights and other obligations. Second, build and strengthen the networks of Indigenous women with disabilities that aims to unite, organize, and establish organizations, networks, and be members of Indigenous women organizations to mainstream disability inclusion and representation at all levels. Third, provide special and concrete measures to operationalize and full exercise of our rights to self-determination, autonomy, and customary self-government systems, including the UNDRIP, ILO 69, CEDAW, UNCRPD, and other international instruments required to enforce the policies in the global, regional, national, and local level, and amend the existing laws from international lens to include groups with multiple identities, including indigenous women with disabilities and groups with multiple identities. Improve and amend gender equality and social inclusion policy at all levels, global, regional, and national, to address all the issues of highly marginalized and most vulnerable groups like indigenous women with disabilities. Ensure the representation, meaningful and substantive participation of indigenous women with disability in the state mechanism. Indigenous peoples and women organizations and organizations of peoples with disabilities, governing bodies with inclusion principle through reservation quotas and enabling environment that are essential to convert inclusion policies into action in all social, economic, and political platforms. Ensure the basic fundamental rights like education, food, health, information, social protection measures, livelihood, secure source of income, skills, promote traditional entrepreneurship, access to land and productive resources, sexual and reproductive rights, including our collective way of life, economic and social empowerment based on customary systems and practices, indigenous knowledge to indigenous women with disabilities to live a dignified life as others. Integrate programs to strengthen agencies and raise awareness to end all forms of structural cultural violence, direct or indirect, linguistic, religious, racial, gender-based, based on physical conditions, etc., and sexual harassment against indigenous women and girls and women with disabilities at global, regional, and national level, and ensure strong justice mechanism, grievances handling, and social protection measures to live dignified life in society. Strengthen the women, indigenous, and disability movement to facilitate and promote cross-cultural boundary, group, ethnicity, organizational collaboration, and networking to strengthen indigenous women with disabilities individually and collectively. Ensure state-led services and facilities are accessible for all indigenous women with disabilities. Allocate and invest sufficient fund and resources for disability inclusive health and communication facilities, accessibility needs like PA services, SLI, mother tongue language, translation, use of simple language, and assistive devices. Ensure institutional strengthening and capacity building programs for indigenous women with disabilities to represent, participate meaningfully, and contribute with their best potential for just, peaceful, inclusive, and sustainable development. Ensure indigenous women with disabilities are included in the studies, documentations, targets, and indicators, as well as disaggregation of data by gender, ethnicity, and disability status. conduct research on understanding the ground realities of Indigenous women with disabilities, and promote disaggregated data and findings in the study, and integrate the issues and voices of Indigenous women with disabilities in the report. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Nuva, for highlighting and reflecting the Asia Pacific Declaration. I would like to inform to all the participants that this declaration was being prepared with the consultation across Asia from 9 countries with Indigenous women with disabilities. And this declaration will be further again integrated at the global level. So I would like to request all our participants, if you do have any concerns and queries in these declarations, you can put forward. And if not, we are moving forward to the next session. This is what I would like to highlight on due to the time limitations. We are now moving to the final session. We would like to request our Sister John Carling, the guest speaker, who is from Philippines, for her observation and remarks and commitment for the inclusion of Indigenous women with disabilities and ensuring that they are represented in the decision-making position. To tell about John Carling is an Indigenous Filipino human rights activist and environmentalist who has defended the rights of Indigenous peoples over 2 decades. She has served as a member of UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous People and also General Secretary of the Asia Indigenous People Pact. She is currently a co-convener of the Indigenous Peoples Major Group, and for the SDG, John has different hats at the global level and at the regional level. And we are very much honored to have her here today because she has been crucial to us for 54 million Indigenous people with disabilities since I met her. She has been able to instrumentalize and make her strong voices for the inclusion and participation of Indigenous women with disabilities at the national, regional, and global level. And I remember that her contribution has remained very fundamental in integrating in AIPP structures when she was a Deputy General Secretary in 2015. So we are very much humbled and honored to have you here as a guest speaker. We would like to have your opinion and thoughts, and also we would like to have your guidance for this collective journey that we are framing through this session on intersectionality, focusing on Indigenous women with disabilities. The floor is yours, John.
Okay, thank you very much, Pratima. And I listened to the earlier speakers, and it's very clear that Indigenous women with disabilities are acting on their situation, and that is a very positive development. And I fully agree with what has been mentioned by our sisters. I would just like to draw attention to some relevant articles of the UN Declaration that pertains to Indigenous women and Indigenous peoples with disabilities, because I think this will sharpen the way we advance our advocacy in relation to Indigenous women with disabilities. So I would like to read these relevant articles. One is the article 21.1, which says Indigenous peoples have the right without discrimination to the improvement of their economic and social conditions, including inter alia in the areas of education, employment, vocational training and retraining, housing, sanitation, health, and social security. And under Article 21.2, which follows this, states shall take effective measures where appropriate, special measures to ensure continuing improvement of their economic, social conditions, and particular attention shall be paid to the rights of and special needs of Indigenous elders, women, youth, children, and persons with disabilities. So I think that's an important area. And then second is on Article 22.1. It says particular attention shall be paid to the rights and special needs of Indigenous elders, women, youth, children, and persons with disabilities in the implementation of the declaration. And further, under this article, point 2, states shall take measures in conjunction with Indigenous peoples to ensure that Indigenous women and children enjoy full protection and guarantees against all forms of violence and discrimination. And finally, just to mention Article 24.2, which says Indigenous individuals have an equal right to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health. States shall take the necessary steps with a view on achieving progressively the full realization of these rights. So I think it's important for us to recall and reflect on these important articles of the UN Declaration, because it provides as you said, the interlinkages and the different dimensions on how we should also interpret the UN Declaration. And it's and how it also addresses and includes Indigenous women and also persons with disabilities. So it provides a good framework for our advocacy in relation to inclusion, but also as you've mentioned, the decision making. But what it also signifies is the importance of including not just addressing the specific needs, but also the aspirations of Indigenous women and Indigenous persons with disabilities. And so that includes the aspirations for education, for employment, for health and social security, for housing, of Indigenous women with disabilities in accordance to their specific needs, right? So that is one that is very important for us to remember also when we do our advocacy work in relation to Indigenous women and persons with disabilities in the context of the implementation of the UN Declaration. The other dimension is that it also provides the need, as you've mentioned, a lot of you mentioned, the need to have special measures for the protection of Indigenous women, and in particular Indigenous women with disabilities, against all forms of violence and discrimination. And it's a duty of the state to ensure that these measures are put in place. Now, I think you've mentioned on elements regarding the lack of participation and inclusion of Indigenous women with disabilities, including in Indigenous organizations and movements at different levels. And this we need to push and make Indigenous organizations more conscious and I mean develop clear policies in integrating this. For example, in the organization that I work with now, the Indigenous Peoples' Rights International, we made it explicit, for example, in our call for application, that we highly recommend Indigenous men, women, and Indigenous persons with disabilities to apply. So it's a way of providing equal opportunities and explicitly acknowledging the presence of Indigenous persons with disabilities, so they become visible. And because as you've mentioned, you always feel invisible. And we need to take measures to make also Indigenous women with disabilities more visible. But the other area that I think that is not given due consideration and support is not just simply addressing the specific issues relating to disabilities.
John, you're muted. John, you're muted. Sorry.
Yes. The other important dimension is also how do we also support and enhance the abilities, the skills and knowledge. And that is how we balance both, because these are also where the dignity and the well-being of Indigenous persons with disabilities should also be recognized and acknowledged, because they are contributing. They still have a role and not just treated, as you've mentioned, as vulnerable. You are also actors. You are also making your contributions. And thereby, in order to facilitate, we need to provide the enabling environment to optimize also your skills and knowledge and further develop this. And I think that is where we also need to push more on this side. How do we ensure that the knowledge, skills, and talents of Indigenous women with disabilities are also enhanced? So that is another area where I believe we can contribute, that you can contribute most, and that Indigenous organizations and networks should also be supporting. And yes, and finally, I think the multidimensional levels of not just in terms of vulnerabilities of Indigenous women with disabilities, but also like I mentioned, where they are contributing the most, and that within Indigenous women's movement and organizations, and within Indigenous people's movements and organizations, we need to also pay attention to this, in not just in relation to decision making, but also at all levels of engagement and participation, because we need to look at this as a way to encompass, but also to enrich the way we engage, the way we include, and the way we respect diversity amongst us, that within that diversity we are stronger and we are more solid, and that we have compassion for each of us, regardless of ability, regardless of ethnicity, and regardless of geographic location. So that kind of holistic and encompassing movement is where we need to push further by first internally addressing this lack or gap within us, but also in the way we present our global advocacy that is more inclusive. And like I mentioned, I hope it was useful to you that I read the articles in the UN Declaration, because it really puts and recognizes that interlinkages and that specific situation, but also the aspirations of Indigenous women and also Indigenous peoples with disabilities. And when we combine the two, then that specific condition should also be addressed, and all their contributions should also be enhanced. I think I leave it at that. And again, it's encouraging for me to see that there are more and more Indigenous women with disabilities that are joining the Indigenous people's movement. This is enriching us, and this is making us stronger. And I encourage you to continue to voice out your concerns in all fronts, within the Indigenous movements, and also within our broader advocacy as Indigenous peoples, and also as women. Thank you, and all the best.
Thank you, Joan, for highlighting your remarks and also highlighting about the legal framework that the UN declarations have, UN declarations on rights of indigenous peoples have provided. And this is how we claim our rights with our states. So this is the point, this is the ground, and many indigenous brothers and sisters who are participating in this event, maybe they are participating for the first time. So they might know how these global achievements have been done so far, and how do we internalize those global achievements at the local level. So I really appreciate your thoughts and remarks provided to us, Joan, as you have already outlined about the legal framework provided by the UN Declaration, and also the comprehensive and multi-dimensional approach, which is very much crucial for linking all the human rights instruments that is directly and indirectly connected with indigenous women and women with disabilities. And I also do like to thank about the aspiration of indigenous women with disabilities, and also looking us not only from a vulnerable and risk groups, but also looking from a group who can really contribute and who are contributing, in fact, in our family, society, and in the global indigenous women's and indigenous people's movement. And we see that within this second World Conference, from the very beginning of this World Conference to the end, we are amplifying and we are looking our spaces so that we could share our challenges and also learn about the achievements from our elders. And we could also tell our needs and priorities, that how we need to integrate in the governing making processes and structures, but at the same time, we do exercise our rights as an indigenous woman and women with disabilities at the grassroots level. So our day-to-day realities that we have should be reflected, and it is the mandate of our member states and our states to ensure our rights. And this is how we are focusing and emphasizing these rights and voices. And we do collectively need to move forward with all this knowledge, with all the equal opportunities that need to be provided to us, and we will be moving forward. This is what I would take as a remarking, concluding a point from Joan, and we continue the affirmative actions that you have clearly outlined about the concrete things that you have done in the proposals for integrating indigenous persons with disabilities is really a step moving forward towards inclusion of all people, including indigenous people with disabilities. And we hope that these initiatives will definitely set an example to us that how we are integrating all the marginalized groups, because it is not only of women with disabilities, it is also about youth, it is also about elderly people and LGBTIQ communities. whose voices are still to be heard within the Indigenous women's global movement. So we hope that these collective voices will definitely enrich us to move collectively. So now I'm moving towards the last concluding remarks. I would like to add a few critical points from these discussions. I would like to wrap the session that intersectional lens and having a multi-dimensional comprehensive approach of the legal instruments are crucial to reach the most marginalized groups like Indigenous women with disabilities, and this has to be a ground for leaving no one behind. Indigenous women and women with disabilities are key contributors, and their roles are crucial irrespective of their sex, age, ability, or other identities. So we need to make them and ensure their meaningful participation at all levels so that they can enjoy and exercise their rights, and they can also amplify their voices within the Indigenous women's movement and other movement, and even in the state mechanism. So the decision-making positions are crucial for Indigenous women with disabilities. Our inclusion and meaningful participation at all levels are crucial. If we are collective, we can do more and better. Our diversity is our strength, and this is our power. So our diversity has to be internalized within ourselves to move collectively so that we leave no one behind, including Indigenous women, girls with disabilities, elderly, youth, LGBTIQ communities, and other marginalized communities within the Indigenous people and women's movement. So with this note, I would like to thank all the speakers from the Asia Pacific regions who have shared their stories, narratives, recommendations, suggestions. We are very much honored with our guest speakers and all the panelists who shared their thoughts in this discussion. We would also like to thank to all our participants who are from different region across Asia. We would also like to thank our technical support person like sign language interpreter, English and Nepali language interpreter, and Spanish interpreters. We would like to thank the entire FIMI team and NIDWAN team and Secretariat for conducting this interactive session. We would also like to thank our Indigenous brothers and sisters who have indirectly supported us for conducting this event and to amplify our collective voices within the Indigenous women's movement. We hope that the World Conference outcome document will clearly outline the issues, voices, concerns, meaningful participation and engagement, and exercising the rights of women with disabilities. We are looking forward the outcome document of the World Conference so that we could collectively move together, building our network, our movement from the local, national, regional, and global level. This is how we are uniting together, and we look forward to your support, cooperation, assistance, and solidarity, that we are not alone, we are collective, and by collectiveness, we can bring power, strength, and we can amplify our voices at all levels. I would like to thank to all our participants and to all our technical persons, speakers with this note, and we hope meeting you in the last session of the World Conference to listen, to hear, to share our collective voices of Indigenous women and women with disabilities. Thank you everybody for your time. I know it has really been a long time, and we know that these examples, these stories will set an example for us moving forward collectively. And we hope that these collectiveness will continue to have broader strengthening movement across Asia. Thank you for your time from the other countries. We would like to also inform that we will have more collective voices in other conferences. We are equally looking the second disability global conference, which is happening next year in Finland. So we will have a concrete declaration on indigenous women with disabilities, and we will also have those amplifying voices in the second Global Disability Summit. That is why we are framing our path, and we would like to join all our elders, sisters, and our indigenous colleagues, and also our members to be part of this global discussion, which is happening in next year. I thank you for all this support and assistance. I would also like to thank to all the FEMI team for providing this rich and interactive session, and also the outcome of this session will definitely pave the path to us. Thank you very much for all of you. And I would like to also greet thanks to our deaf participants who are listening to this conversation. So this is how we thank to them with our two hands to the deaf participants. So I would like to also thank to the deaf participants. Thank you very much. I would like to request finally to all the speakers and all the panelists and to all the participants to switch on your video so that we could take a collective photo with you. Kindly, please switch on your video so that we could take a photo collectively and then say goodbye to all of you. Pema, can you help us in taking the photographs? Thank you once again. And we hope that we will be again informing you the last session of the World Conference that is happening on 2nd September evening time. So all the participants will be notified by the NIDWAN team, and we look forward your collective solidarity for the endorsement of the 2nd World Conference outcome document of Indigenous women. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, John.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you so much from Bangladesh.
Thank you and all the best, and wish you a very best for the upcomings from India. Burung tamang hai.